Namaha. Om Amriteshwaryai Namaha. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidamritavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashaadhyayinim Amba Tvamanusantatami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravinda Yatapatra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purna Prajwalito Jnanamaya Pradipa Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrita Duhe Namaha Sarvopanishado Gavo Dogda Gopala Nandanaha Partho Vatsya Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gitamritam Mahata Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum. Om Namah Shivaya. So, tonight we will approach the conclusion of the third chapter. And next week we will again have a class, and next week we'll conclude chapter 3, and we'll have a summary of chapter 3. Because when we started it, it was so long ago, it was like a different yuga. Now we have to go back to the beginning. That was, Dwapara Yuga. This is now Kali Yuga. So we have to review our what we studied before. That's what we'll do next week after we finish the last two verses. And but last time, Lord Krishna mentioned about desire or kama as the main obstacle on the spiritual path. And this was why? Why did he bring up this subject? No reason?
Because that's what makes us do things we don't want to do, knowing that they're wrong.
And then why did he talk about it in that context? Anybody remember? Arjuna asked a question, right, exactly. That's the important thing. This is a very important question that Arjuna asked at the end of, I think it was the beginning of last class, or somewhere around there. And that was why Krishna brought up this subject. He didn't suddenly say, you have all this evil desire in you, therefore you are a bad person. It's not like that. It was in response to a question, which you find is what Amma always does too. She never comes out and says, you have this problem, that problem. It's only in response to questions. So he said that desire is an enemy of a person who is trying to grow on the spiritual path. And he spoke in some pretty extreme terms. He called it evil and said it was all-consuming. Today he's going to give a few other descriptions of kama or desire. But if it's evil and if it's all-consuming, there's no question of reconciliation, right? It's like we don't negotiate with terrorists. You don't say, well, if he's evil and he's out to kill everybody, then you don't sit down at the table and talk it over. You have to just somehow remove that person or that thing. So Krishna doesn't leave negotiation as an option for kama here. So he's going to talk about how to remove or to destroy kama before it destroys you. Now, when we talk about this in Australia, all kinds of confusion comes up because when they talk about karma, they pronounce karma, kama. Good karma, bad karma, like that. So everybody gets confused. So when we say kama, remember we're talking about strictly about uncontrollable desire. Not just, I want to have a bowl of cereal in the morning, that kind of thing. We also should remember that when Krishna is talking about this kind of desire, he's talking about it literally in the sense of something that cannot be sublimated. Now, we know when we look at things from a different perspective, I think it was Ramakrishna Paramahamsa that said, don't try to remove your desire, increase it all the more and direct it at God. Right? That's what he said. He said you can leverage that for the sake of your spiritual growth. You can use it, point it at God, and make it devotion. So, where that technique works, we would do that. Now, he's talking about where it doesn't work. That's why he's going to talk about removing it. So he's going to begin by explaining the nature of desire, and he's going to tell us where it hides and how to deal with it. So we will read verse 39 together. Avritam Jnanametena Jnanino Nityavairina Kamarupena Kaunteya Tushpurena Nalena Cha. Okay, someone who has never read yet, perhaps, if we have anybody. We have some people. Oh, you didn't read yet? Oh my goodness, we better let you read. No? No. Well, there's someone sitting right next to him. I bet she can help. Can read together. Has he?
He's not going to manage these words.
All right, okay. You want to try? Maybe Jayashree can help you. Because you raised your hand, so I thought. Mute it all. You can mute that. Mute the computer.
Wisdom is veiled by this invisibility, infestible flame of desire, which is the constant enemy of the wise. O son of Kunti.
Yeah, okay. Wisdom is veiled by the insatiable flame of desire, which is the constant enemy of the wise. Okay. Doesn't sound very, very good. Doesn't sound like something we want to have happen to us. Okay. So the word desire he uses here is kama, as you heard when we read out the verse in Sanskrit. So this is the explanation of the pronouns he used last time in the previous verse 38, where he said this and that. This means wisdom, or actually it means viveka, our discernment, and that means desire. So this is the elaboration of the last verse, 38. So he uses the word analaha here, which means fire. And that's why he calls it the insatiable thing. And so basically the metaphor here is that wherever fire is, it destroys that thing. So if you have fire in your house, it destroys your house. If you have fire in your mind, it destroys your mind. So if he's comparing kama to that, so it's going to destroy that place where it abides. If you let it abide in your mind, it's going to destroy that. And it's an insatiable fire. No matter how much wood you pour into it, it doesn't, it's never satiated. So just like any fire, you still, the fuel it never dies unless you stop feeding it fuel. So to show how desire plays out in our mind, I want to tell a little story that took place around Amma. During darshan, a devotee was telling Amma, actually was a young man, so he was happy that he won a watch in a carnival. So he showed Amma, see the watch I won in the carnival? And Amma said, wow, you're so lucky, that you won that. And he said, actually, I'm not very lucky, because after I won it, the next day they made the first prize an iPad. So he says, so I lost, actually, Did he lose anything? He lost the imaginary iPad that he never had, right? And he couldn't, because of that perceived loss, he could not enjoy the free watch that he won either. He felt like he lost something. So this shows how desire is insatiable. Even if you win something, even if you get something, you'll never be satisfied with that. Amma used to tell the story of a fellow who bought a new sports car, the best one. He was so happy. And he wanted it so badly, he got it finally, and then all day long he just thought about his new sports car. He wasn't paying attention to anybody in his life. He was totally meditating on his sports car until what happened? The next door neighbor bought an even better one. And then he hated his car. He thought, oh no, what a piece of junk, And then he hated the neighbor for buying that car too. So he couldn't enjoy his new sports car anymore because of the insatiable desires. So we should keep in mind, even though it says wisdom is veiled, what do you think? Is it possible to really veil wisdom? If you're a knower of the self, if you're Amma, can Amma's wisdom or knowledge ever be veiled? No. So this must not be referring to true wisdom. What it's referring to is, and the analogy given is that it's referring to discernment, our viveka buddhi. So it's not actually being veiled. It's not that the wisdom is being veiled. Our discernment, our judgment is being veiled because we're deluded by our likes and dislikes. When we look back at the bad decisions, the wrong decisions we've made in our life, typically we'll see that they were the result of some kind of attachment we had to something. Attachment or aversion. That's what typically makes us choose the wrong thing. So really our only protection is maintaining our discernment properly. And if we can't discern properly, what's a good alternative? If you don't know what's right or wrong, if you can't, that the viveka shakti or the viveka buddhi, the discernment doesn't come to your rescue, what's a good solution?
Flip the coin.
Something a little more devotional, maybe? Pray. We can pray to Amma. We have a guru. We have not only just any guru, we have a realized guru, and someone who is in the body, who is with us, who is profoundly dear to us and can answer our questions, not only indirectly, but sometimes even directly when she comes here, we see her. So the surrendering to Amma inside, say, Amma, I don't know which one is right. You help me. You please help me make this decision, but more than anything, I want you to give me the proper discernment so that I can answer these questions. I'll be able to perceive what's right and wrong. Sometimes if you pray or sing a few bhajans, you find that your mind becomes clear, and then you get the right, you can make the right call. So that's why, because that discernment is really our only protection from making the wrong decisions, Amma says we have to protect that very guarded, very with a lot of awareness. And if that discernment fails us, it's really like opening the door wide to any kind of robber or terrorist coming into our mind. She said it's like, when the disease AIDS, how does AIDS first start affecting people? Right. So the immune system is like the guard at the door of the body, right? The immune system guards the body against all the bacteria and viruses and all that. So if that is compromised, then any any disease can enter the body and virtually kill us, basically. I think if you have AIDS, people often die of viruses and things that normal people wouldn't die of, right? So that's the viveka, or the discernment, is like our immune system in a spiritual sense. Amma last year said, I don't know if anybody remembers this, typically it's hard for us to retain what Amma says, but she said, living according to the whims and fancies of the mind is like giving our house key to a thief, or like having a drunken security guard. Isn't that a good analogy? Can you imagine having a security guard at the door? He's drunk. What's the use in having the security guard? You know, you can influence him with a little drugs or a little bottle of whiskey or something like that so easily, and then you go in the house and steal all the valuables. So that's what happens when we don't use our judgment properly. So
sounds like you're describing the White House.
Yeah. Is that what happened at the White House?
Yeah, the security.
Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that story. Okay. So, throughout our life, really, that self-awareness is our only protection that we can implement, right? Otherwise, we just surrender to God completely, surrender to Amma completely. But unfortunately, most of us haven't done that either, right? If you surrender to Amma completely, like some of the innocent devotees we read about in the Puranas, then Amma will definitely come to our protection. But most of the time, we're neither here nor there. We neither have really complete, proper judgment, nor do we have full surrender. So that's the problem. If we do one or the other perfectly, then we'd be okay. So we have to hone both our surrender and our discernment at the same time. And so because that self-awareness and discernment is our only protection, the desire or karma attacks that first. Just like AIDS, or just like the terrorists trying to get into a complex by killing the guard. This is what they do first. The first thing is kill the guard, then you get into the place. Or, if you're very deceptive, you can dress up like somebody else. And in Amritapuri, Amma's ashram in India, the easiest way to get in is you just wear a white dhoti and a white jubba, put on this putta, and then you walk in and then you look like everybody else. So then, you go up to the, inquiry in the accommodations office and you could even get a free room. You never know. So this is actually very symbolic because what happens is first, desire enters through the gate of the senses. In fact, it is said that we live in this city of 9 doors, or Navadwara Pura. So what are the 9 doors? The 9 gates to this city? 2, 4, 6, 8. No, actually, yeah. Yeah, 7, 8, 9, yeah. Actually, it doesn't refer to the skin usually. But that's a huge door, definitely. That's a huge door, definitely. It's like the biggest organ on the whole body, they say, right? So, anyhow. So, through any of these gates, the terrorist of desire can enter very easily because we're not so cautious. And he enters into the ashram, our ashram, which is our antakarana, the inner organs, mind, intellect, and the subtle body, right? So then he befriends the receptionist. Who's the receptionist? The mind, right? Because the mind is the first thing that meets when a sense stimuli enters the body, like through the mouth or through the ear. The mind encounters it first, right? So he befriends the mind. Hey, I'm good for you. You like me, right? And then the mind leads him to the accommodations office, which is the intellect. And then he lives there forever, and then you're stuck with him. So the challenge is that you can't keep all of your Navadwara, your 9 gates, closed all the time, right? Even though sometimes we feel like running away and going to the Himalayas and not meeting anybody or doing any of these things, it's not realistic. We have to keep the gates open. So you need a really good watchman, basically. That's why the emphasis is always on viveka, or proper judgment, discernment. So why does Krishna say the constant enemy? Anybody want to hazard a guess? Could be an occasional enemy. Why does it have to be a constant enemy?
Aren't we constantly being exposed to senses?
Yeah, well, yeah, he just says karma is he doesn't say the senses, he says karma is the constant enemy. But yeah, we're constantly being, it's there all the time. It's ready to maraud us in the jungle, like we said last time. Anybody else want to say why it's a constant enemy? Yes?
Well, if we were without desire, wouldn't we basically be realized at that point? Or?
Yeah, that's a good point too. And the thing is that what one commentator has said is that, a wise person, and I think he uses the word wise person, their goal should always be liberation, right? Moksha. Moksha is the constant goal of a wise person. So if it's your constant goal, then karma is the constant enemy, because moksha is the infinite. Karma, the precondition for karma is that we are identified with something finite. So all these desires and everything assume that we are feeling incomplete, and then liberation is fullness. So they're mutually exclusive. Yes, Marla?
I would say also because sometimes they can be really subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're not so obvious. So if they're subtle, it's just we have to be always watching the self.
Exactly. Yeah. The subtlety of it is another factor. There's many factors. So just good to verify, with ourselves together like this, why he says some of these things. He didn't have to say constant, but he did. So, yeah.
Swamiji, as long as there's sense organs, they'll always experience objects. There's nothing
Right.
else for them
Exactly.
to experience.
That's exactly what Jay Shri was saying. So you're always, even if you hide in a closet somewhere, you're still going to have to, expose yourself. So it's a constant threat, If you want moksha, if you don't want moksha, it doesn't matter. It's not an enemy to you. It's your friend. But ultimately, in fact, I think Shankaracharya says that it's only a problem for people who want liberation. If you don't want liberation, what happens is that it's delayed suffering for you. The person who wants liberation understands that it's suffering right away. But person who is not interested, it's okay for some time until he realizes that it's suffering hidden in pain. So there's this little story of Little Red Riding Hood, right? When I was studying this verse some years back, I remembered that story of Little Red Riding Hood. It's almost a very Vedantic, philosophical tale. I don't know if that was written with a philosophical intent. But Little Red Riding Hood, in this context, is the jiva, is the individual, an ignorant individual. And the wolf is desire, right? The wolf tries to befriend her, and at first she thinks, oh, the wolf is a very nice person, She's just kind of gives herself over to that wolf, and then ultimately the wolf is about to eat her. And then what happens? Anybody remember? I think he did eat her, didn't he?
Well, different versions.
Okay, well, let's say he ate her. He ate her. The good version of it. He eats her completely, because this shows the importance of the hunter. A hunter came and killed the wolf, right?
Right.
And he killed the wolf, and then what did he do? He cut open the stomach, and he saved Little Red Riding Hood from the belly of desire, from the belly of the wolf. That's the guru. The guru comes, even though we're devoured by desire completely, Amma kills the desire, not like suffocating it, but means removes that and then saves us from the belly of desire. So I love that story when I thought about it in this context. So the third adjective that he gives it is insatiable. So he has 3 adjectives for desire so far. And so here, in the past 2 verses, he said how desire is an enemy of us. And now in the following couple of verses, he's going to prepare Arjuna for the cure. So let's hear what he says in verse 40. Indriyani Mano Buddhir Asyadishthanamuchyate Eter Vimohayatyesha Jnanamavritya Dehinam. Okay, maybe you can read the English with the mic. She's coming now. A friend in the green shawl. Here.
The senses, the mind and intellect are said to be wisdom's seat, overshadowing wisdom. By means of this, it deludes the dweller in the body.
It's a beautiful way of putting it, the dweller in the body. Who does that refer to? Us, right? They don't say deludes you. He doesn't say deludes you. Because if he deludes you, that means that he's saying you are that thing that is deluded, right? He means it deludes the dweller in the body. Now, it's up to you to decide whether you consider yourself the dweller in the body, or you consider yourself the body, or what you consider yourself. Yeah, exactly. So now the topic from here shifts to how to destroy kama or desire before desire destroys you. And what strategies should we use? Maybe the shock and awe technique. And hey, remember that one from whenever that was? When they were trying to bomb that country, it was Afghanistan or something. Is a full-on frontal assault, or do we think about it a little more deeply and then carefully proceed? So Krishna says, no, first you have to figure out where this enemy of kama resides, because if you don't know where it is, you're never going to win this battle. I think America is still fighting the war on terrorism because we don't know where the terrorists are. They have these cells and you just don't know where they are, so it's just a never-ending war. First you have to figure out, where does this enemy reside? What's his stronghold? And then you can figure out how to get rid of him. So fortunately, Krishna doesn't make us wait. He immediately reveals where the stronghold of the enemy of desire is. And what does he say? Where are the three places? There's three hideouts. Senses, mind, and the intellect. Okay. So these are the three bases, you could say, the main bases of this terrorist of kama who's trying to steal all our peace of mind. And when you have these bases, typically the strategy is you try to recapture those bases. And then, because they're getting all their, that's the supply lines come through these bases, right? So if you can cut off the supply lines of energy, then you can starve out the enemy. So that's what Krishna is going to do. He's going to guide us to recapture these three bases. So why are these senses considered to be the first base of desire? Should be pretty obvious, but just let's go through that process. Why?
Through the senses that we interact with the world.
Right, exactly. Because all of the sensory information enters into us, or this conglomeration of factors that we call us, enters through the sense organs. So that's the first base. And then the second, mind, what happens next? Why is the mind considered the base of desire, kama? Yes?
Because that's where the thoughts just go on over and over and over.
About, which stimulated by that sense information, the sensory stimuli. It's they call it stimuli. It's really true. These, like, if someone puts that food that you like the most in front of you, it enters into the eyes, into the nose and everything. And then you think, oh, wow, that's such a tasty dish. I love that dish. Then you start thinking about it, and then it's happening in the mind. And the mind is the one that repeats it over and over and over again, and producing a liking, or what we call vasana, right? What Amma often calls a vasana. So that's why it's usually at the level of the mind that we have to sort of undo all of that. That's why there's that beautiful bhajan, Manase ninswantamai urutaru millannulla. You know that song? Anybody remember what the meaning is? Not just the tune and the words.
Well,
Mind
mind
becomes surrender.
Yeah, it's actually, the literal meaning is a little different. That's the English song. It says, realize that supreme truth that nothing in this whole world is yours. Because the mind is a limited thing, you know, at this point. It's identified with the body. So either nothing is yours or everything is yours. There's only two options. So because the mind is identified with this body, then you have to say nothing is yours. Once you become Amma, it changes, everything is yours. So this is the beautiful effect of that song. You know, when we sing these songs, we have to remember the deeper meaning of them and how they are programmed. They're actually designed in such a way that they help reprogram our mind. You know, I have printed 3 songs today, just because they're so Vedantic, and if there's a chance at the end or somewhere in between, I will read out a couple of 1 or 2 of them, because they're examples of how we can use the mind itself to transcend that sort of unconscious process of programming the mind in the wrong way. So, but because the mind is the second stronghold, desire hides amongst the thoughts in the mind, like a thief who joins the crowd in the village shouting, catch the thief, right? This is basically what the desire does. It joins in that stream of thoughts, thousands and thousands of thoughts, and it hides there and it says, yeah, catch the thief. So it's impossible to tell that desire from all the other thoughts, unless we're very, very alert. And the third stronghold is the intellect, right? Why? It's a little more difficult to understand why we would say the intellect is a stronghold of desire.
It stores the intelligence. Mind's the processor.
Mm-hmm.
The intelligence behind it is the...
But wouldn't you think that the intellect would then be the savior that would protect us from desire? Why is he saying it's one of the strongholds of desire?
Because it rationalizes the process.
Ah, yes. See, what happens is once the desire becomes too strong...
The rules are inside the...
Intellect. Yeah, the intellect sets boundaries and calls the rules, but then the intellect can change the rules and customize them to the whims and fancies of our emotions, which is what often happens. So, like that's what Amma said. If you live according to the whims and fancies of your mind, then you're in trouble. So, one nice metaphor that was given was that when the intellect stops functioning properly, or when it starts malfunctioning, it blurs our vision even more. It's supposed to help us clarify our vision, but it blurs our vision even more, like a broken windshield wiper. You ever had a broken windshield wiper? It's supposed to make it easier to see, but when you have a broken one, it makes it easier to see or no?
Worse.
It's even worse. And not only that, see, you're supposed to, the windshield wiper is supposed to go faster and help you more in foul weather. But if it's a broken windshield wiper in foul weather, it makes it even worse. So it makes it doubly hard to see. So the intellect is supposed to come to our rescue when things are rough, to help us make the proper call. But if it is malfunctioning, then it will make an even worse call when things are rough. So that's the problem. So Krishna's suggesting we recapture these 3 bases, and then we can use them on the path towards moksha rather than self-destruction. This is a good time to read one bhajan. So what happens if you recapture the mind? Then what you can do is you can sing a song like Vandavaratane Chandravaratane Janmagalatane Yo. You know that song that Amma sings? The meaning is so nice. How many people have come, how many have gone, and how many lifetimes have passed? How many people have prospered, how many have fallen into bad times, and how many have died? How many relations, how much bondage, how many tests, and how much pain there is. Time and again, the mother-child relation has been forged, only for this bond to dissolve. Given that disease will eventually take us all away, who do we have to call our own? Is it right to abandon one's dharma and then blame God for the consequences? While living, we have many relatives. After death, who is there to call our own? The mind is a temple. Kali is enshrined therein. Remember this always. Let us awaken God consciousness. So you're using the same mind, right? If you recapture it, you can sing a song like this and direct your mind at thoughts like this, rather than, oh my God, what am I going to do? My goldfish died, or something like that. It's a small thing, it doesn't actually belong to us, but the mind is getting disturbed. So this is the importance of keeping our discernment also and recapturing these three bases. But if we ask ourselves, why is it so important to preserve our discernment? Because he says, right, it veils the knowledge, or what he means is the discernment. So what is the importance of protecting the discernment? Some of you have mentioned it before, but like what Amma said in her quote a few minutes ago that I read, we become a prisoner of our likes and dislikes if we don't keep our discernment intact. So we need to be able to see the defects of things that our mind is drawn towards too strongly. And then what about things that we have an aversion to? See the defects of the things we have an aversion to? No, we're already seeing it, right? How about a person you don't like? You have to see their defects? No.
See the good in them.
See the good in them, right? So Shankaracharya says that vairagya, or dispassion, he defines it as dosha drishti. Dosha drishti, those of you who know Malayalam or Sanskrit, what is dosha drishti? Doesn't mean dosha drishti. Yeah. Sarvatra dosha drishti, we're seeing dosha everywhere. Dosha drishti means seeing the defects, right? Seeing the shortcomings of an object. So if I'm infatuated with something, I have to remember that that thing is temporary, or a person. Typically in high school, people have infatuation. So what happens at that time, they're not seeing any of the defects of that person. They don't even know the person. They may just be sitting in the same classroom with them. They never talk with them, and they just paint them as a prince or a princess. So you have to see the defects in order to regain your senses. If it's someone you dislike, it's the other way around. You have to see their good qualities. That's called Sadguna Drishti. So if there's somebody you dislike, practice Sadguna Drishti, or seeing their strengths, and then the opposite for things that you're kind of obsessed with. Now, typically the problem is that we get obsessed with things, too much focused on them. So the scriptures have told us in another context that things of the world have three main shortcomings. We say, see the defect, dosha drishti. So they give three main defects of the objects of the world. This is to help us free ourselves from the slavery of the objects, right? So anybody want to hazard a guess at what these three might be? Maybe we can come up with a few more, but yes?
Essentially, there's the cost of acquiring it, the cost of maintaining it, and the cost of dissolving it.
Exactly, and what they call that is pain.
Yes.
The pain of acquiring, the pain of preserving, and the pain that you experience when you lose it. The truth is with the body. Same thing holds for the body. Acquiring the body was very painful, both for the mother and for us. Stuck inside there all this time, and then finally birth, we cry. It's so shocking for us to come out of the womb. Maintaining the body is suffering many times. And then leaving the body, even though we had so much suffering in the body, when the body comes time to leave it, we feel suffering again. Instead of being happy, I finally liberated from this prison. We think, oh no, I need 5 more days, just a few more days. I haven't said goodbye to this friend and haven't done this and that. So that's one thing. Another thing is, anybody want to say another one? The hidden suffering in all the objects. What is it? What are the defects of the objects of the world and the people?
Impermanent.
Impermanent, exactly. Which means that it never gives lasting satisfaction, right? Nothing in the world, no matter how much we get, it never gives lasting satisfaction. The proof, all you have to do is interview some really super rich people. And everybody knows somebody who is well-to-do. Ask them, are you happy? They all have lots of problems. Their problem just has a few more zeros at the end. Our problem is like $100 problem, theirs is $100 million problem. So just add a few more zeros. Then any amount of acquisition. So then another one is, the more we depend on these external objects, what we find is the weaker we become, right? So the more, let's say somebody takes antibiotics every time he gets a sniffle, what's going to happen? Immune system's going to get compromised. Your resistance is going to get compromised even more. So like that, every time we feel restless, instead of saying, maybe I should become a stronger person so I don't feel restless at little things, instead we try to satisfy the restlessness by feeding the mind something. So we just get weaker and weaker and weaker because we're depending on all these things. So these are examples. We can tell our mind these things if the mind is running after objects. So first he said it was the enemy, then he said why it is the enemy, and then he showed us where its secret hideout is, and now he's going to try and tell us how to recapture these three, starting from verse 41. Tasmat tvam indriyanyadau niyamya bharatarshava papmanam prajahihyenam jnana vijnana Nashanam. We have one sister in the back row. We can have her read. In the back row, agree.
Therefore, having first organized the senses, O best of Bharatas, shake off this evil, the destroyer of knowledge and realization.
Okay. So this verse, actually, there's a lot of meaning saturated in there, especially between the lines. So it needs a little more explanation. He says first, right? So that means this is not the only step. But actually, it's the only step that he enumerates here, so we're going to have to extrapolate after understanding the first step. So he says the first base is the senses. He says, and organizing, what did he say? Organize the senses? Huh? Yeah, we're going to go into that. It is not very clear. It's one of those things where you would say, what do you mean by that afterwards? And then the guru has to explain in depth. So we have Amma, and we also have commentaries that have been written on this. So why did he say the senses and not the intellect? Right? We talked about the senses before. So, of course, we said the senses are the first point of entry for any desire. And the mind receives the impressions and begins contemplating on it. But the first feeble thought wouldn't be there if it weren't for the senses. So like the hurricanes that besiege the East Coast and the Midwest start where?
The ocean.
Yeah, just a little bit of moisture from hot water in the tropics is the beginning of a 200-mile-per-hour hurricane that can kill people and destroy a lot of things. So every destructive emotion starts from some kind of sensory stimuli. And if it's something that came up suddenly, we can just bet that it's from previous life exposure, right? So it's not just coming out of the blue, it's already been there from a previous experience. So we haven't tamed the mind, so this unconscious exposure and unconscious dwelling on all these things is what's creating the problem. So yes, definitely we start with the senses. And if we can control the senses, or we can think of it as harnessing, because the word that is often used is nigraha. Nigraha, mano nigraha, buddhi nigraha, and also indriyani nigraha. Which means sort of like, if you put it in a negative sense, it would be like restraining, but if we put it in a positive sense, we could think of it as harnessing, right? In order to harness something, you put a harness on it, and you can direct it in a positive direction. So it's not suppression, it's harnessing that so you can direct it where you want it to go. So like we said, we're not saying we're going to shut down all of our senses, we're going to direct them towards something positive, like Amma. You know, Amma doesn't just come out for 1 hour and disappear. She spends hours and hours and hours, virtually all day with us. When she's here especially, she's in the hall all day long. So if we choose, you know, and if we're not too busy, which may be the case, but even still, we can try to spend time in her presence. Just look at her. Listen to her bhajans, her satsang. The more time we spend with her, the more we're focusing our senses on something uplifting, rather than something that's going to drag us down. That's another example of organizing the senses. You're directing them in such a way that they are uplifting, they're helping you on the spiritual path rather than harming you. And another reason is because if we are not cautious enough with our sensory exposure, what happens is that the mind gets whipped up into a frenzy eventually. And then it's the hurricane, right? Then it's like Hurricane Katrina. Once it becomes a hurricane, there's no stopping it at all. No matter how great and advanced human beings have come, when a hurricane or a typhoon comes, they just bow down. Even the greatest emperor has to hide. Even Alexander the Great, he's got to run and hide in a cave. There's no hope to escape. You can only surrender. So no matter how great you are, how rich you may be, you still have to surrender when that hurricane comes. So don't allow the hurricane to form if it's possible. Because even then, the intellect will be rendered helpless. Then it joins the enemy. You know that what happens when people get kidnapped and they get in that Stockholm syndrome? You ever heard of Stockholm syndrome? What happens then? Huh?
They start to identify with the enemy.
And then they're kidnappers, and then often what do?
They stay with them even if they don't
They stay with them, and they defend them. They protect the kidnappers.
Right.
So this is exactly the same thing. I think that Stockholm syndrome is really a beautiful metaphor spiritually. We all have Stockholm syndrome, actually. We've already been kidnapped long ago by the ego. And we have to free ourselves now. But the only problem is that we have this syndrome and we don't really want to be free. So if we're in that circumstance, the senses, the mind, and the ego all become our enemies, basically. So then the next is we have to assume, okay, wait, there's another reason why we start with the senses. Anybody else want to try to guess why that would be? It's not just that they're the first point of entry. Another reason why we focus on the senses exists. What would that be? Which is easier? Which is more perceptible, more tangible for us? The senses or the thoughts? Senses. It's grosser, as they say, stula in Sanskrit. I know in English, and typically America, gross doesn't mean that, but it's hard to come up with a better translation for the Sanskrit word stula. We could say it is more tangible or more concrete, or you can use gross in the sense of tangibility. Yes, it is an external organ, primarily. You know, you have eyes, you have your nose, your ears, things like that. So we can harness it much more easily than we can harness the mind, because it's something that we can perceive better. So another good reason for starting with the senses is because there's more likelihood, because it's more tangible, there's more likelihood we'll succeed. And if you gain confidence first through the senses, then we get a little more confidence to deal with the mind. Otherwise it can be very difficult. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed by all the negative thoughts in the mind. So start with a little, sensory restraint, yeah?
Like, I'm just thinking of your example, like with a child, you often regulate what they watch, what they listen to, what they see, what they hear,
Right.
until they develop the discrimination to
Exactly,
use
yeah.
it.
With children, we regulate and sort of limit their sensory input so that until they get the proper judgment. Also, we need to have some successes, because if we go straight for the intellect or for the mind, what happens is typically a lot of failures, and the more failures you line up, the less self-confidence we have. So just like we use simplified controls to control a very complex and subtle piece of equipment, then we have the simplified controls in the case of the mind or the senses. So it's a few knobs here and there, and then we just adjust those, put some delimiting factors there, and then we can control the mind much more easily. So in order to do that, how do you regulate the senses though? Think about it. Because we can't regulate everything all at once, right? So what would be a guideline for each person to regulate his or her senses? Because it probably won't be exactly the same for everybody, right? Yeah?
Moderation.
Moderation, right? That comes up later in the Gita too. Moderation. But what's the definition of moderation, right? Because it might be different from person to person, yeah.
I would say it's also the discernment of what you will or won't allow in, because like if you think about it, it's not like we're having so many senses from the inside. Those would be more like the transcendental senses, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then everything's coming from outside inward. So if we have discernment about what we allow in and what we don't allow in, then that's where the control would be. Like, for example, today a coworker started talking about this and that, and I just looked at her and I'm like, I'll be right back. And I just walked away. I just straight up walked away because I'm like, my ears are like, no, we don't want to hear this. And I'm like, you'll excuse me for a minute. And then I came back and she totally forgot what we were talking about.
That's good.
You have to TV, you don't watch TV, you don't listen to the stuff on the radio, you tune in,
Right.
Tune into Alma, tune into, your meditation. Right?
And what we saw earlier in chapter 3 was that everybody has different gunas or different mental qualities, which means that your mental qualities are drawn to different things in the world, right? So when I was a little kid, I was drawn to certain things, but some of those things just don't affect me anymore. Now other things will affect me that when I was a kid I wasn't interested at all, right? And for example, people who are, finally just gotten off of cigarettes, so they were a chain smoker and they finally got off of it, if you put a pack of cigarettes in front of them, it might create a tremendous desire in them, Whereas if you put it in front of a 4-year-old kid, it's not going to affect him at all. He doesn't even know what they are. So what we need to avoid and what we need to regulate is different. If we know, so in a way, we need to understand our own mind really well. We need to take an inventory, sort of whatever our weaknesses are and whatever our sort of Achilles heel might be. We may have many Achilles heels. And that, those things are the ones we should avoid the most. For everybody, taste is a big weak spot, no doubt. That's why it's always good to have a little control of food. And if you go to Amritapuri, you eat just the kanyi every day, which is rice porridge, rice soup with some curry on it, watery curry. You can be sure that you will have some detachment from food after some time, because it doesn't taste bad, but it's not an indulgence in taste either. So it's always good. And then you can always make your food without salt 1 day per week. 1 meal per week. What's the harm? Really bland food. Try it. See what happens. Krishna says in the Gita, later on, I forget which chapter, he says, food should not be too spicy, right? I was just thinking to myself, but 5,200 years ago, or whatever it was, What was too spicy for Krishna? You know, he's Indian, right? He's already Indian. So maybe too spicy means it should not, like, your tongue shouldn't fall off, you know. Your tongue can be on fire, but it shouldn't fall off. So maybe that's what too spicy means. So whatever for us needs to be controlled a little bit, we control that somewhat.
If that might explain Kali's tongue.
Yeah, could be. So,
Is this an example of your intellect at work here around spicy food?
perhaps, I'm not quite sure how it connects, but anyhow. The prakriti that he talked about earlier in this chapter is the point we're referring to. Your nature, your inherited tendency, is what determines the things that we have to be careful about. Doesn't mean that the world is bad. What makes it bad is just whatever drags us down. So if you're a recovering alcoholic, then alcohol drags you down. For most of us here, we don't have that problem where we're really worried about, oh my God, am I going to go to the nightclub and get drunk tonight? I have to be very careful, you know. We don't have that problem. So we have other problems. We have to figure out what our weaknesses are and give some limitations, self-imposed limitations, but we have to understand that it's not just suppression. We're going to get to that in a moment. So this is how we start. Just how we start. Once you've mastered it, if you're someone like Amma, we don't have to worry about it. She can expose herself to anything, and doesn't matter. I remember once, one of the Swamis was telling me about a time, I think one of the first times they went to Singapore. They went into some house, and just so happened that the TV was on in one of the rooms. Might not have been Singapore, I can't remember. And then some pop music and some dance show came on. And they said that Madonna was dancing on the screen. Now you can just imagine, the ratio of skin to cloth, was very, very high. The skin was about 90% cloth, was only about 10% on the body. And then she's dancing all over the place, right? And apparently Amma was looking at it and was mesmerized. And she was looking, and then she turned to somebody and she says, dancing. Is all she saw was the dancing part, this innocent, bliss, just looking at somebody dancing. She wasn't affected by the karma part of it, at all. So she saw the beauty of the art, of the Saraswati there, So anyhow, mastering actions is a lot easier than mastering thoughts. So understand what actions are dangerous for you, what exposure is dangerous for you, and then try to set up some limitations that we can uphold. So the rest of the
But no matter what Amma was watching, don't think for a moment she doesn't know what's in everybody else's mind.
Yeah. Maybe she knows what everybody else is thinking, and she's saying, just look at it as dancing. Just look at it as dancing. Yeah, right. So we can imagine, or we can extrapolate the next two steps, right? If he starts with saying, organize the senses, in other words, focus them on good things that help you to grow spiritually, what's the next step going to be? Organize the mind. And then after that, it's going to be organize the intellect. Now what does that mean though? That's why we need a little extra time for this verse, because we have to extrapolate extra meaning. So what is organizing the mind or harnessing the mind? What does that mean? Well, first of all, it's always good to remember that prevention is better than cure. Right? So if you don't want to have a big hurricane inside your mind, then you immediately go back to the first thing. The first step towards organizing the mind and focusing it on what's good is preventing it from getting exposed to all these things that are going to disturb it. Right? So if you know that there's somebody who always gets you angry, kind of like what Marla did at work today. Let's say, for example, she was going to get angry. She didn't say that, but let's say she was going to get angry. She left the room. So that's a good way to, prevent yourself from getting angry, right? Just remove yourself physically. It's not a long-term solution, it's not a permanent solution, but at least you avoided disturbing your mind. In fact, Amma has said, if you catch yourself about to get angry, just leave the room, she said. Leave the room. Go somewhere else and just go, Om, in a really loud voice or something like that. Once, I think it was 1992, we were in Amritapuri, and some devotee, Japanese devotee, asked Amma, what do I do when I'm really angry at somebody? Is it okay to get angry at them? And Amma said, you know what you do? Go to your room and you take a pillow and you bury your head in the pillow and scream into it. You know? That's better than hurting the other person, right? Right? You can, once anger possesses you, it's very hard to dissolve it. You can't just suppress it. So you just scream into a pillow, she said, and dissipate that ferocious energy. But if you hurt that person, they'll hurt you back, and it's perpetual. Huh?
I've heard her say it thinking that pillow's me.
Hug the pillow, thinking it's Amma. Amma, help me. That's a better way. Yeah.
That's a better way. Because if you scream the anger out, the anger is actually harming you too.
Yeah.
But if you transform it to feel love.
Right. Yes, that's true. But you know, there's another thing this reminds me of is that it's, you know, when Amma gives these solutions to people, we always have to remember that she's thinking about what that person needs. You know, maybe this person wasn't so devoted to Amma. That was the problem. If Amma had said it was me, maybe they would have, but I don't know you that well, maybe. If that person had more devotion, like the person Ron was observing, maybe she would have said that way, yeah? What were you going to say?
I was just going to say there was another story that I heard at Amritapuri, which was that there was a physician who used to get very angry at his patients, do you know this one? And then Amma said, okay, next time, and he was talking to Amma about the devotion, and Amma said, well, next time I want you to take a picture of me, and when you get angry, I want you to hit the picture.
Oh, wow.
And he said,
I can never do that.
he said he could never do it, but Amma made him take the picture, apparently. This is the story I heard. And months later, he came back and he said, so did you get angry? And he's like, yeah. And she's like, well, did you hit the picture? And he's
said,
like,
no,
I couldn't do that.
Couldn't do that.
And she said, you have to hit the picture. You know, so eventually, he did it. And apparently, it cured him of his anger. He couldn't believe that he brought himself to do it.
Yeah.
And then he said he felt so bad, he finally understood what he was doing to people.
Yeah.
Because he never imagined.
Beautiful.
He couldn't really understand what he was doing.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay.
I'm not suggesting that.
All right, okay, let's keep going.
But what if you're at school and you get mad at somebody? You can't go home and go and scream into your pillow.
That's true. Well, what Amma told somebody else was to just imagine that person is Amma. Imagine that that's Amma just playing a trick on you. She's testing you to see, am I going to get Breton angry again today? Can I do it? Let me see if he's a big boy now, so maybe he's finished being angry. Let me just check and see. Maybe she's just testing you, hiding. So you have to say, I know, you're just playing a game. I'm not going to fall for it this time. You can say that. Okay, so prevention is better than cure. So try not to let all those things that get us upset inside the mind. But once the karma gets into the mind, right? Then what do? Because, like we said, we can't keep our senses closed, shut down all the time. So then what you have is a situation where the terrorists are already inside your country. And they hide inside the country. This is what happened. When were those Mumbai attacks on India? What year was that? Terrible attacks that took place in Mumbai. Huh? It wasn't long after 9/11, right? So what they did, I'm told, the Pakistanis, they dressed up as Hindus. And they wore the bindi on their forehead and all that. So it was very easy to disguise themselves. They're already in the country, So like that, in our case, our ego can hide inside of us even as spirituality, right? Look how spiritual I am. Look how spiritual look at my clothes. Look at how, I'm a great devotee. I do puja, I sing bhajans, I do all these things. So the ego is hiding inside of our spiritual identity. You have to be very careful. Look how much seva I do. Don't try to steal my seva. This is my seva. This is my position. That's just the ego hiding in our newly acquired spiritual persona. So that's like the terrorist hiding inside. So Amma says, we should talk with our mind. That's one really good way to talk your mind out of these negative tendencies. And these bhajans are also a beautiful way to do that. But in the Bhagavatam, there's a beautiful verse that says, It's like the way Amma tells us to talk to our mind. It runs, "O desire, I know your origin. You are indeed born of sankalpa," which means like fanciful thoughts. "I will not allow any sankalpas, and thus you will be destroyed along with your root." And Amma was put in a little more casually. She'll say, like, say to your mind, why do you chase after all these things? We've done this for years and years and years. Every time we do this, it always ends up in misery, right? So why do you want to keep running after it? We're just getting tired. Pretty soon we'll be old and weak and we won't be able to do any of these things anymore. And then what's going to happen? We won't have any energy left to do spirituality. So let's just drop it here and now. Or you can sing a bhajan like this. Adalarase, you know that? Adalarase, adalarase, adumiravai parumarase. O Lord of dance, look at these people dancing in illusion. They have listened to many philosophical treatises, but when will they realize those teachings within themselves? People think that the body which falls off in course of time is their own. But the blazing fire that consumes the body at the end will think, this is mine. You got it? That means the cremation. At the time of cremation, the fire says, this is mine. People cry when they are born, others cry when they die, but who will cry when they know their own self? All glorify the enlightened person, but who strives to become one? Bestow real knowledge on us, O Lord of Death. O one with dancing feet, Lord of Arunachala, beloved of Parvati, Supreme One, Nataraja, you are the wealth sought by all, the essence of all hymns, the ultimate grace that everyone seeks. Why can't we sing that instead, right? So when the mind is chasing after all these things, you just pick out one of these songs and sing that and remind the mind that it's on the wrong track. So this is like organizing the mind, right? Redirecting it in a positive way. So it's not easy though. Let's say, like Breton says, you're at school or you're at work, and what do I do then? How do I do that with my mind? So that's why Amma says, at other times, as much as possible, we should engage the mind constructively in positive things. Usually that means seva, devotion, bhajans, prayer, puja and things like that. Meditation, huh? Mantra, exactly, mantra japa. So all of these things are ways to engage the mind positively so that it doesn't get that tendency of wandering off into negative things. And that's also why we need a lot of Shraddha, or the Malayalam version of Shraddha, which means like awareness or self-awareness. Because in Amma, have you noticed that Amma often is very careful about the way things are done physically? She's not just talking about inner awareness. Have you ever been scolded by Amma when you didn't do the candy prasad just right? Anybody ever been scolded? Really, so few people. How about the darshan line? You ever got scolded? Well, you didn't get scolded by Amma. Huh? You got scolded by Amma? Yeah, see? She has a very particular way that things are supposed to be done. And we think that it's so nice to be, I wish I could be with Amma more. Oh, all those guys, they get to be close to Amma. They're so lucky. I am so far away. I don't get to be close to Amma. But just remember, it's like a fire. The closer you get to it, the hotter it becomes. And the thing is that it's that fire of concentration. Amma is constantly focused all the time. We have this habit of allowing the mind to just roam all over and do what it wants. But when you're around Amma, the mind can't do that because everything is very beautifully orchestrated. So the closer you get, the more focused you have to be. And after 5-10 minutes, people will be like, oh, I can't take this anymore. Because you have to be so present, focused all the time. So, she says, Shraddha in the physical level is the first step towards Shraddha on the mental level. So that's why keeping your things with a lot of awareness, like if we would just throw something on the ground, Amma would never appreciate that. She would say, pick it up, now put it down again, very carefully. So, with inner awareness, we will start to understand what's going on in our mind better, and which thoughts are worth keeping and which ones should be discarded. So, Amma, previously, did you guys hear the example she said previously about caller ID? You know, she uses all these modern examples in her satsangs. What did she say about caller ID? Actually, now we have it on our cell phones. Caller ID was when there was, these landlines. But, so like on your cell phone, you have caller ID because it shows the name, John Doe, or Jane Doe. So, because you can see the name, you can decide, you're supposed to answer every phone call, right, equally, sure. But what happens if you kind of know you don't want to answer that phone call? Or you think that this is going to be a negative influence on me or something like that, you might not answer the phone call. So Amma says that, like that, if we have inner awareness, every time a thought calls us and tries to get our attention, we can decide, maybe I'm not going to answer that, I'm not going to respond to that, I'm just going to ignore that one, because it's not going to help me on my spiritual path. So instead of judging yourself for the thought, you can just say, just like some phone calls you can't answer, I'm not going to answer this thought. And Amma has said that the mind is like a beggar going around to the 5 houses on its daily rounds, begging from the 5 senses for some food. Mind is constantly begging. So she says, best is to keep the beggar from going out on the rounds in the first place. That's called shama. So controlling the sense organs is called dhamma. And then controlling the mind, keeping the beggar from going out on his rounds is shama, mind control. Now you guys remember there's a song where there's shama dhamma comes in it. Anybody remember what song that is? Which song? Arati. Shama dhamma daini manaleya karini amritanandamayi. She's the one that gives us both the organizing power for the mind and the organizing power for the organs. So turn to Amma if you want to make these 2 go properly. But then what about organizing the intellect? What about that? How do you organize the intellect? That's not we don't think in that way very much. Let's go back to what we said about sensory control. What happens if you just do sense control because Krishna says so, or Amma says so, or Shantamrita says in Gita class, thou shalt do such and so. And you say, well, I don't really feel like doing it, but I guess I have to do it, he said so. Then what's going to happen? Is it going to be a pleasant experience? No. What's going to happen?
You're just going to be doing it, you're going to be like, oh, I have to do this.
Yeah, like if Shantamrita says you should fast once a week, should not eat any food once a week. And then you're like, why? To just do it. How's that going to feel? Bad. Think you'll be able to do it for a very long time? No. Okay, so she knows the answer. So then, we need some kind of support, right? So that's where the intellect comes in. The intellect needs to be fed proper understanding of all these things. It has to understand, why am I doing this, right? Is there some reason why I'm doing this, or is it just because I'm torturing myself, Because after some point, the mind is going to say, why are we torturing ourselves? We don't want to do this. There's a lot of things out there you could be enjoying, and you're denying yourself all that enjoyment. Let's stop this right now and go have fun. Eat all those things that you're saying you're not going to eat.
It's like seeing dancing.
Yeah. How is it like seeing dancing, though?
It's the highest set of rules that determine how we perceive the world or how we act.
Right, a deeper understanding. Yeah, if you look at it with a deeper understanding and a higher perception, then even something like fasting is appreciable. You can say, wow, this is a great thing. Right? Anybody have...
The organizing rule set.
The organizing rule set. The intellect needs to be founded in proper understanding of all of the principles behind all these things. That's why Amma says we need not just devotion, but not just bhakti, but tattvatile bhakti. So tattvatile bhakti means devotion based on principles. If you don't understand the principles behind your devotion, what's going to happen? Bad things happen in life to everybody. Bad things happen to good people. So then we're going to, after all this prayer and after I've been to the temple so many times and I offered so many things to Bhagavan, now this happened to me. That's it, I'm done. But if you understand that it has nothing to do with devotion in the first place, then it won't affect you. So it means our understanding of what devotion is for and what it's all about was wrong if we have that negative reaction. So that's an example of how the intellect also needs to be organized properly or needs to be harnessed properly so that it'll help us on the spiritual path. Otherwise, you can provide a rational excuse for not doing any of the spiritual practices, right? It hasn't done me any good. I haven't changed. It's a waste of time. I could be earning money. I could be doing this. I could be doing that. Lots of logic just for the sake of not doing things that are helpful for us spiritually. So the intellect can be our enemy too if it's not trained properly. It's going to say you're losing. There's so much pleasure. You're losing out on the pleasures. And then the intellect has to come and say, no, we're not losing, we're gaining. It looks like a loss, but it's actually a gain long term. So then the last thing we need to understand about this verse before we switch to questions is that what is the difference between jnanam and vijnanam? Now here he says, what's the translation given? Knowledge and realization? Knowledge and realization. So, it means jnanam and vijnanam in the original Sanskrit. So vijnana is like special knowledge, I guess you could say. It's just not your everyday average knowledge. So what we have here is when you guys go home today, you will have knowledge of verse 39, 40, 41 of chapter 3, right? But doesn't mean that you're completely free from desire, right? When you walk out this door, that's it, no more desire ever again. Because you heard these verses and we studied it, we spent over an hour studying this, so it must be over. No, unfortunately it's not that easy. It means that it's not become our actual subjective experience. That's why Amma says, just chanting, repeating, Aham Brahmasmi, I am that, I am that, I am God, over and over again, doesn't change anything. She says, you heard that story that she tells? There was a guy, a pseudo-spiritual person walking down the street chanting, I'm God, Shivoham, Shivoham, like that. And then somebody decided to test his realization and came and just pricked him with a needle from behind. And then from the same mouth came all kinds of foul language, scolding and cursing that fellow. So, and then Amma says, what happened to God? Where did God go? Where did Brahman go? Where did Shiva go? So there was no Shiva there in the first place. He hadn't realized it. And then she tells another story where a Mahatma was walking down the street. He was saying Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. He was a realized being. And a thief comes up and attacks him and steals his thing and chops off his hand. And then he looks at the hand with the blood squirting out and he says, Shivoham, 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 and he keeps walking. And the thief turns around and is just completely astounded that this guy can walk like that without any reaction. And then Amma adds a little Hollywood ending. She says that he just looked at his hand and another hand grew back. Yeah. So Amma says, so if you can do that, then you can say Shivoham, Shivoham, and then it's okay. And having the actual direct experience of it, that's vijnana. That's the difference. As long as it's limited to the intellect, it's only knowledge. Now, just so we don't get confused, in most circumstances, when he says jnanam, later on especially, it means actually realization. So we have to be careful. When he puts jnana and vijnana, when he lines them up one after another, it means that vijnana is realization and jnana is just knowledge. The kind of knowledge that we're aware of. Intellectual knowledge. So, ultimately, all of this is the palliative treatment. It is symptomatic treatment. or first aid, it's not the final cure. Now Krishna wants to give the final cure, the permanent cure to the problem of desire. He's going to teach Arjuna and us how to uproot the tree completely. And that's next week. So we will continue the last couple of verses of chapter 3, and we will also do a summary to see what in the world did we study the past few months, so we remember that before we launch into chapter 4. Chapter 4, I think we get to at the end of this month. I think we should be able to get there. Now, any questions? Yes, Bhunesh.
If we've got Dharma and Shama being the sense control
Can you give them the mic?
Give them the mic.
Oh.
If we have Dhamma as I'm not
Sense control, yeah.
pronouncing it correctly.
Yeah, Dhamma.
Sense control, and Shama, mind control. Do we have a word for intellect control?
It is just buddhi nigraha. It is like that word we used before, sort of harnessing the intellect. Another word may come up. It's like viveka buddhi. Viveka buddhi is what is also used. The process of making, actually it's that process is explained in another way. It's explained in most of the scriptures as Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. So the process of organizing the intellect is described as being a 3-step process, which is listening to the teachings of the Guru, Guru Upadesha, and then contemplating on it, and then meditating on it deeply. So, in other words, assimilating it through meditation. Generally, that nididhyasana, I find around Amma, the deep meditation on the teachings comes especially in her presence, and especially when we're doing seva in her presence. If we can sit quietly and meditate for hours on end, we may get that effect as well. But typically around Amma, the form it takes is you're doing some kind of quote-unquote selfless service, and in the process of that, different revelations come to us that make that teaching real for us, finally. So that is the process by which the intellect is finally brought into the proper state. Okay, any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand this process of the relationship of the senses, the mind, and the intellect. And it almost seems to me, from my perspective, a catch-22. Because if the intellect hasn't bought into that process of why one should do it, the mind won't then go to work on controlling the senses. So it's true, the senses, it seems clear that the senses are where you start. But the intellect has to be involved.
Yes. True, very good point. It is a catch-22, but in practice, we all find that we have varying degrees of slavery to the likes and dislikes, even in the course of one day. Typically, nighttime is when people do all the wrong things. We see, all the bad things happen at night. So it's the sattvic, or the pure time of day, is morning. So usually we're a little more clear-headed in the morning, and not right after we wake up, maybe after a shower or something like that. And we can make resolves at that time. We can make resolves for certain spiritual things in our life when our mind and head is clear. But when the ice cream is right in front of us is not the time to try and make a resolve, because that's when the weakness starts acting up, So if we have a resolve we want to make, we should do it when our mind is clear, and when the intellect, we have the cooperation of the intellect. So, if you set that's why they call it making vows, because the assumption is that you need to make a vow in order to create some kind of guidelines. If you, for Amma doesn't need to make vows, because her mind is always clear, right? So her intellect is always cooperating, her mind is always cooperating, and the senses are just wide open all the time and doesn't have any effect on her. But because, like you said, our intellect doesn't always cooperate, the mind doesn't always cooperate, when we have those clear moments, we need to make resolves and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Every Saturday, I'm going to fast one meal or something, or every Tuesday, I'm going to be silent until noon. Now I'm clear, now I know that I need that, I'm going to say that. I'm going to promise myself I'm going to do that. And if I had the clarity all the time, I wouldn't have to promise myself that, right? I would speak only as necessary. But because I don't do that, I have to make a resolve. So that's one reason why all these vratas or vows are recommended especially in India, you set the ground rules and then you abide by them. Because your intellect and mind sometimes may not want to, but if you promise yourself you're going to do it, then you're kind of stuck. Okay. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Yeah. Oh, yes, Skype.
So the question from Skype is, what does Amma say about getting angry with kids? Sometimes the only way is showing the anger at them, and controlling it won't help. But again, we lose so much energy by doing so.
Oh, definitely always get angry at the kids. I just wanted to see what the kids' reaction to that would be. Well, Amma has said, on numerous occasions that anger should be like a tool that you take out of your pocket when you want to use it, when it's necessary, and that as soon as that's over, as soon as it's served its purpose, you put it right back in your pocket. Especially when you have to deal with kids, or let's say you're a manager, or you're in a position of responsibility and you have to. Some people only respond to anger, or they only respond to, like, they have thick skin or whatever it is, and loving kindness doesn't work on them, Especially people who have sort of strong negative tendencies. Sometimes a little fear is what they need. And if you are in a position where you're responsible for a lot of people, especially if they're your kids, you need to use your discernment to decide when you need to use the tool of anger. Even Amma uses it sometimes. Anybody seen Amma angry? Right? Now, Amma, could you remember at that moment that the anger wasn't real? Or for a moment were you deluded into thinking it was real? Who was deluded into thinking it was real? See, the thing is, that shows you how good she is at using anger. She's so masterful at using it that all of us fall for it. She'll say to you, and then the next moment she's smiling and laughing at somebody, but at that moment it was so real for us. So that shows she's a master at employing emotions for a good purpose. She's never going to say, you did this to me, therefore you're bad. That's never how her anger plays out. It's always like, if you hurt somebody or if you hurt yourself, and if you did something that's bad for yourself, she'll do it. Otherwise, she never uses it. So that's our role model, just how Amma uses it. And she will also use sorrow, even though we know she's never sad. She'll say, Amma was so sad to see, how you did such and so. Or, Amma was so sad to see the suffering in that person's face after you shouted at them. Something like that. She'll see, it just brought tears to my eyes, she'll say it like that. So it means that nothing can really bring tears to Amma's eyes but devotion. But still, she'll say that. She'll look very sad and sorrowful, and it's so real that we feel it. So all the emotions for Amma are just things that she employs to help us go in the right direction. So if we can do that in some measure with children, that's good. But the test is, how quickly can you recover from your emotional display, quote-unquote display. If it's really a display, immediately we'll recover afterwards. But if we're involved in it, if we're identified with it, then it sits in our mind for a long time afterwards. So you have to be the judge of whether you did it properly or not. You look at yourself. How long did it take me to recover my composure after I supposedly just used it as a tool? And you'll see whether you're doing it properly or not. I'm sure. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Lokaha Samastaha Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Sure. So this is the official closing of today's class. And those who have time, please remain with us for the meditation. Faith, you want the 2 more songs? There's 2 more songs. So take a few long, deep breaths. And with each deep inhalation and exhalation, feel your body and mind relaxing further and further. Try to feel Amma's subtle presence here with us in the room. Present as Lord Krishna all around us and even within us. Now direct the mind to witness the rhythm of your breathing process. As the breath naturally flows in and out, direct your awareness at that process and remain as a witness, watching the flow. Observe how the lungs fill with air and the chest rises on each inhalation. And observe how the chest empties out all of the air and the lungs become empty with each exhalation. Try to feel as though you are not involved in the breathing process. The body is expanding and contracting on its own, and the breath is flowing on its own. Now use that same witness consciousness, applying it to the thoughts that enter into the mind. Anytime a restless thought enters, try to witness it just as you witnessed the breathing process. Watch it come and watch it go. Just as the air carried by the breath does not belong to you, it's neither good nor bad, so too the thoughts do not belong to you. They are neither good nor bad. They belong only to the mind. Now let us open our hearts and pray to the Divine Mother, to our beloved Amma, for her guidance and grace. O my beloved Mother, please shine in my heart and illumine not only the path before me, but the space within my mind. O Amma, when you shine inside of me, I can see all the thoughts clearly. Please help me to see the emotions even before they arise. Don't let me harm anyone from carelessness in my mind. When I'm about to hurt somebody from my emotional disturbance, Amma, you come inside and steer me in the proper direction. Please shine inside of me and give me the mental clarity I need, Amma. Help me nurture the good thoughts and remove the negative thoughts. Please give the nutrition in this garden of my mind. Fertilize all the healthy plants and help me remove the dangerous and harmful ones. Please make my mind into a fragrant garden full of beautiful flowers. And then let me offer each and every thought as a flower at your feet. Let's now chant the concluding prayer. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnāād Purnamudacchate Purnasya Purnamādāya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. One more long deep breath. And as you exhale, slowly open your eyes. Shvaya, I'll see you next time.